This presentation is an initial report on a study based on the experiences of Peter, a mid-career musician and music educator. Through a series of narrative vignettes, the study followed Peter's reflections on his formative experiences as a musician and classroom music teacher. We explore how his unique musical and pedagogical background positioned him to make a mid-career transition as he responded to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on music performance and education. As musicians begin to restructure and adapt their portfolio careers in an attempt to create resilient musical livelihoods, we present an account of how one individual is adapting to postnormal times by blurring the lines between his identities and careers as musician and teacher. In the first of a series of narrative vignettes, Peter recounts his eclectic formative musical experiences.
When I was 4 years old, I ran up to the TV, pointed at Hoots, the owl from Sesame Street, and looked back at my mother shouting, "Phone, phone, I want to play phone!" I later came to understand this to be the saxophone, and during my childhood I received saxophone tuition from Dr. Elizabeth Kelvin and composition tuition from her partner, John Plankenhorn. They were instrumental in my development as a musician, introducing me to a wide range of composers and musicians like Schoenberg, Charles Mingus, and Led Zeppelin. At this time, my friends started a punk rock band, and as I knew music, I became the bass player by default. We'd switch instruments, and so I learnt drums and guitar during these jam sessions. And on Sunday, I'd be playing in the church band on whatever they needed, usually drums or bass, and that night I'd play with my sax teacher's jazz combo that played every week at a local pub. And so on Sunday, I'd be turning up the amps and distortion. Sunday, be praising the Lord. Sunday evening, I'd be improvising over my favorite jazz standards. And on Monday afternoon, I would be learning about saxophone techniques, serialism, jazz, and improvisation. I didn't really think about it much as different experiences. It was all just music to me, and I loved it. My classroom music teachers largely left me alone, giving me autonomy to follow my own interests. And I thought this was lazy teaching at the time, but now I do appreciate that they nudged me in the right direction from time to time, while allowing me to have informal learning music sessions with my friends, something I really look fondly of now as an adult. Reflecting upon this time, I can see that the skill set I have now as a musician, as a teacher, and musician-teacher is a convergence of all of these experiences. Despite being very different, they were extremely complementary. I learned to be energetic on stage and just let loose through the punk rock band experience. I understood the spiritual and communal aspects of music through singing and playing songs in church. I became a technically proficient musician through my formal tuition experience, and I understood what went into playing in front of audiences through the jazz combo. Interestingly, I got to the end of school thinking that somehow the amazing experience I had outside of school could be had more often in school as well. And this was ultimately a driver to sign up for a Bachelor of Music education at the University of New South Wales. Within 6 months of moving to Sydney and beginning my studies, I joined the Hot Potato Band. At that time, it was just a 6-piece roving second-line brass band playing corporate and community events around Sydney.
This musician's formative rural music education does indeed sound idyllic. Experiential and pluralist in nature, it reverberates with, quote, dynamic social experiential activities through and in which musics are made, experienced and put to work for a variety of overlapping and interweaving human purposes and benefits. Also notable is the musician's equal experiencing of performing, composing, arranging and improvising, again as linked pluralist activities rather than disconnected, quote, specialised and within a limited range. Reflecting as an older teacher, the musician sees connections between the student-centred, contemporary practices of his youth and Green's theorising of informal learning that he only learned later.
In the second vignette, Peter reflects on how our paths met as he made his transition into classroom music teaching.
As part of my undergraduate degree, I studied a wide range of musics. While I went through the familiar subjects on orchestration, harmony, and music history, it was my first experience of thinking through the philosophical, pedagogical, and technological aspects of music education and education in general. While I had a solid idea of what content I could teach, I had very little idea of the myriad of ways of how to do that. My broad skill set as a musician provided me with an excellent base to teach in the music classroom, but I didn't yet know how to implement the amazing experiences I had outside of school as a teenager into the classroom. I wanted to marry my experiences as a gigging musician to the music classroom, but didn't know how to do that. Moreover, I didn't get introduced to informal learning scholars like Lucy Green in my undergraduate studies that I know would have really helped in my journey. During my practicums, the dominant method of teaching was to teach with worksheets or notations as the main stimuli for music learning. I felt extreme tension between my desire to provide students with authentic experiences in the classroom and the dominant teaching methods modelled to me during practicums and music method teaching classes at university. At the end of my degree, my desire was to be a part-time teacher in the classroom while continuing to gig around Sydney. I was successful in landing a part-time job. However, it did soon become full-time when the person that I was going to be job sharing with resigned. Brad Fuller had been given the task to redesign the music classrooms, and by the time I had arrived, the space had been completed and I walked into a state-of-the-art facility. Now, as the only two music teachers, I started working with Brad and we would have all sorts of philosophical discussions while setting up music gear in our classroom. It was during these times that my idea of what music education could be became a reality. Despite being a gigging musician, I didn't know much about music production or how to set up music equipment. I took on the mantra of fake it till you make it and sunk my teeth in through reading, watching lots of music production videos on YouTube, and being more aware of what was going on at our Hot Potato Band live shows. I tried to soak up what Brad would be discussing with me, often going away, writing notes in my phone of what we had just discussed so that I wouldn't forget them. Within 3 years of working together, Brad and I had updated, created, and innovated programs together. It was an approach to music teaching that I had not seen in my high school experience, nor my undergraduate degree, and the practicums I completed during these studies.
While classroom music education has consistently been described as alienating for students, this vignette also reveals an alienating process for the teacher. This alienation begins when teachers uncritically take on the teaching methods presented uncritically to them at university to produce an abstraction of music called, quote, school music, which replaces the, quote, free play and creativity with exercises and worksheets. This marks the beginning of a split between the musician and the music teacher. In this next vignette, Peter identifies some of the tension he experienced in trying to reconcile his music education with the music education he was being trained to deliver as he reflects on his early experiences as a classroom music teacher.
I definitely experienced tension between my responsibilities in the Hot Potato Band and being a full-time classroom music teacher. I would take leave to go on tour, or I would race out of the door on a Friday, jump on a plane and just make it in time for a Friday show somewhere interstate, trusting that my band members had sound-checked my microphone without me. Coming back to school, I would experience the come-down one has after a sold-out show, and on little sleep I would catch the first flight back to Sydney, get a taxi straight to school, ready to teach. The normal life of a teacher was not something I could really identify with, and I found this tough to navigate. The tension would also be felt on tour when I would switch into Mr. O mode with my computer out in the tour bus. In these instances, I would be preparing lessons or completing my postgraduate studies. Despite the tension between my two identities as musician and teacher, I tried my best to marry the two. I would often take lessons learned in my teaching approach and apply them to the band in rehearsals, sound checks, and songwriting. Some examples include when I designed and built a touring in-ear monitoring system for Hot Potato Band based on one Brad and I had designed, and when Brad and I produced a YouTube TV show to showcase original compositions that our students had composed. We multi-track recorded, video edited, and distributed these online, and I still use these skills today as YouTube producer in Hot Potato Band. Similarly, I would take things learnt on tour with Hot Potato Band and bring them back into the classroom. Some examples include distilling the choreography and performance techniques of my band into simple techniques that my band could learn, or showing them first-person video of recording studios, recording techniques, and live performances from venues around the world as stimulus for discussion, or being able to explain the band's collaborative compositional and recording approach. A high point of this convergence was when I organised a recording session in our music classroom where I invited our elected musicians to attend and help set up. It went late into the night, but the parents loved that their children had the opportunity to see a professional touring band record.
Talk is cheap, my darling, when you're feeling bad at home. I wanna make you move with confidence. I wanna be with you alone. So help me start it. You're too comfortable to know. Throwing out those words, oh, you gotta feel it on your own.
In making the transition from teaching school music to teaching music in school, Peter's skills and knowledge began to flow from the classroom to the industry and from the industry back to the classroom, providing multiple benefits to the community and to Peter personally. This to and fro of knowledge and skills marked the beginning of a blurring of the lines between his life as a musician and his life as a classroom music teacher. Pedagogically, the shift to teacher as practitioner and towards educational activities drawn from practice mirrors what Dewey describes as the shift from, quote, object lessons to, quote, the training of attention and of judgment that is acquired in having to do things with real motive behind and a real outcome ahead. In this final vignette, Peter describes how a global catastrophe provided the impetus for him to take the next step in his metamorphosis.
Like most of the world, all of my teaching went online when the pandemic hit in March 2020. As we had a blended learning course that extensively utilised an LMS, we were in a better position than most to transition to entirely online teaching. We were under fairly severe restrictions when students returned to face-to-face learning. It was a really tough year to be a music teacher and dramatically reduced the number of opportunities the students had to do music. In terms of performing in Hot Potato Band, it ceased altogether. We had just finished playing to thousands at WOMAD in New Zealand as part of our sold-out tour over there. And when we got the news that the Prime Minister of Australia had recommended everyone get back home, we had to cancel shows, reimburse tickets, and hop on the next plane. We were really discouraged by this, given we were just beginning to see the fruits of labour as a band for 10 years prior to that moment. As 2020 finished up, I took long service leave, and during this time, I began thinking about how I could merge my dual identities of musician and teacher. Hot Potato Band had always received requests from schools to come and do workshops, but we never had someone with the time to make it happen. At the same time, the new principal at my school was less keen on me touring. He had begun to reject my requests of leave, and I could see that this tension would soon grow to be too much and something would have to give. Given this, I resigned from classroom music teaching and took on the role of booking and managing Hot Potato Band in schools, as well as leading professional development for music teachers with Brad as part of our approach to classroom music teaching we call gig-based learning. From 2021, the Hot Potato Band started to collaborate with school bands, working with them to put on a gig for their school. It turned out to be a really successful mix of my experiences as musician and teacher, combined with my new identity as entrepreneur in gig-based learning.
In this final vignette, we see that Peter's attempt to, quote, imagine himself out of postnormal times has resulted in a new congruence between his dual identities. He has indeed found a way to, quote, marry his musical philosophy with his music education philosophy. The New Orleans Second Line Parade brass band tradition, which is, quote, all about participation, whatever you do. You just do it, jibes with his praxial approach to music education, which is founded on the notion that music is the result of, quote, critically reflective actions and active reflections. Becoming a musician-teacher has opened up a new musical livelihood, not just for Peter, but for the entire Hot Potato Band, as they take their musical message to schools during the day and to the stage at night.
The best part of today was seeing a guy in the back row in the band, in the workshop. We said we'll start to play When the Saints Go Marching In. He was like, I hate When the Saints Go Marching In. And then we performed it with them, and by the end he was dancing around with his instrument and just loving it. So that transformation to see in person was really cool.